Welcome to today's presentation. I'm looking forward to unpacking the School-Based Mental Health Services Grant Program recently announced by the U.S. Department of Education. We'd like to give you an overview of this grant program as now proposed so that you can begin to prepare for a potential proposal. My name is Dr. Howie. I'm the president of Project Achieve Educational Solutions. The anchor to what I do is Project Achieve, which is an evidence-based school success continuous school improvement program that was identified in 2000 as an evidence-based program by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I'm an internationally known consultant. I've been working for over 40 years, both around the country and internationally, and I typically present on school improvement, social emotional learning, social skills training, and multi-tiered systems of support. You might know me more from my social skills training program, the Stop and Think Social Skills Program, which is also an evidence-based program through SAMHSA. I'm a past president of the National Association of School Psychologists, a fellow of the American Psychological Association School Psychology Division, and I'm a senior fellow with the Center for Model Schools. More important to our discussions today, I've been awarded in partnerships with school districts across the country over $40 million in federal grants, most of them from the U.S. Department of Education. Over the past decade, I have received the grants that you see on this screen. 5 school climate transformation grants. These are 5-year grants. They were funded for multiple millions of dollars, and they helped me to partner with school districts across the country where I was able to go on site and provide professional development and consultation for up to 40 days per year. I was also awarded the elementary and secondary counseling grant with the Scranton School District back in 2014 to 2017. So I have spent the bulk of the last decade being in the field, implementing services from a school improvement perspective down to looking at academic services and supports, down to looking at social, emotional, and behavioral multi-tiered systems. I'm an experienced grant writer, and I can give you some insights today into what it may take to write a winning grant proposal for the school-based mental health grant. So today's mission is really for you to look at your district, your school, or your educational setting and transform its mental health capacity. We're going to do this by looking at 4 specific areas: the current crisis and the opportunity that we have right now to change mental health services and supports in our schools. I'm going to talk about the grant details of this proposed school-based mental health grant, the money that's available, and the requirements that you will face when writing a proposal. We'll talk about winning strategies, how to maximize your success in writing your proposal so that it gets funded. And finally, I'm going to offer a partnership opportunity for us to work together to use my experience as a grant writer, partner with you, so that together we will be able to write a winning grant proposal such that you receive the funds that you need for the next 3 to 5 years. To start, as we all know, those of us in education and across the country in our communities, the mental health crisis is real. The numbers simply don't lie. The cornerstone to the proposed school-based mental health grant is that it will help your district, your educational setting, to be able to either attract or to train at a higher level of efficacy your school psychologists. The current reality is that there are approximately 1,065 children for every school psychologist in the public schools across the country. That's the ratio relative to the 2023 to 2024 school year. The National Association of School Psychologists recommended ratio is 500 to 1. And so the current reality is way beyond what is recommended by those in the professional field. And the U.S. Department of Education has recognized that, plus the fact that we have so many children who need mental health and social emotional services, that they have put as a cornerstone of this grant the recruitment and the training, the respecialization, and the professional development of school psychologists to get more school psychologists in the field and in our schools. Clearly, both before and since the pandemic, there has been an alarming decline in students' mental health nationwide. We have districts that are high-need districts that are struggling to deal with the mental health needs of our students and who are struggling to fill their school psychology positions. Relative to the decline, we have seen increased discipline incidents in schools across the country, both office discipline referrals and suspensions, expulsions, and alternative program placements. We have a chronic absentee problem in schools across the country. We still have significant academic gaps, and all of this is translating into staff burnout and turnover. So the U.S. Department of Education has recognized all of these needs, and they have put forth this school-based mental health grant. The focus of the grant, as it's proposed right now, is to increase credentialed school psychologists in schools across the country, to expand, diversify, and support the school psychology workforce with training and coaching where it's needed most, to extend that training to other mental health practitioners in our schools so that we have a higher level, a higher efficacy of both prevention and intervention services, support strategies, and interventions for our students' social, emotional, and behavioral health. The federal grant is going to target high-need school districts, local education agencies, and the timeline is starting toward the end of this year and beyond. So who can apply? Right now, as proposed, there are two large groups of eligible applicants. One, state departments of education, and two, local education agencies as certified by their individual states. We are going to talk in this presentation more about the LEAs than the SEAs. But when we're talking about local education agencies, the grant proposal allows consortia. So different school districts who are near each other can band together and submit one application. We could have, for example, in New York, BOCES, Board of Cooperative Educational Services, in Iowa, AEAs, in Michigan, the ISDs, the regional educational centers in individual states can also submit proposals for this grant representing a consortia of LEAs. In terms of high need LEA qualification, here are the definitions as in the proposed grant thus far. One high need criterion is a student to school psychologist ratio of greater than 500 to 1 and high rates of school violence or poverty or substance abuse or suicide or trauma or a combination thereof. High need LEAs could be LEAs that received the federal Project SERVE grant since October of 2020. And then a high need LEA could also be a school district that's experienced a traumatic event since January 1st of 2025. So in your grant proposal, you're going to have to show the data, the description that meets one or more of these criteria in terms of qualifying your district in the proposal as a high-need LEA. There are 4 strategic priorities in the current proposed grant. The first 2, as I've already alluded to, are grant proposals coming either from a State Department of Education, an SEA, or a school district that's designated as an LEA in the state. So this is basically going to separate the pool of applicants into 2. You're either going to be a State Department of Education, SEA applicant, or a school district LEA applicant. The next 2 priorities form the substance of the grant. So the third priority is the focus on early and intensive specialized services in the mental health intervention area. And the fourth priority area is a re-specialization area where special educators or counselors or social workers who are working in a specific LEA can re-specialize in school psychology through the activities and especially the funding of the grant. Let's deep dive these 2 priorities. So priority 3 in your grant proposal will focus on how you are going from a professional development to a coaching and supervision perspective, how you are going to increase and improve or upgrade your early and intensive mental health services. So your early intervention services that may be focused on in your grant proposal may include screening and identification of students in mental health need, small group interventions at the quote tier 1 level, or brief individualized support services that are provided students through the professional development and the coaching that is written into the grant. The intensive mental health services may include at the tier 2 and tier 3 level, individual, group, and family therapy, coordination with external providers like community school-based mental health professionals and those in private practice, and then crisis intervention and support areas. The point here is that beyond recruiting and retaining school psychologists as part of the grant, the content of the grant in this third priority is to increase the services, support, strategies, and programs that are available to the schools in your district from an early intervention through an intensive mental health service perspective. Priority 4, as we briefly already mentioned, is a re-specialization priority. So relative to increasing the number of school psychologists, it's not just about recruitment and retention of school psychologists, for example, coming out of school psychology training programs. It's, if you will, a grow your own perspective, where through the grant, you are identifying people already employed in your district, like special ed teachers, clinical psychologists, community counselors, related mental health professionals who are also out in the community, and giving them the re-specialization opportunity so that they get credentialed in school psychology and then can be employed by your district. So some of the support strategies that you may be building into your grant proposal are streamlined certification pathways, the financial support for the retraining, providing flexible training opportunities for your eligible candidates, and ensuring that after all is said and done, that your candidates will able to be either licensed or certified as a school psychologist in your state. As one of the things that I'm bringing to the table as a potential partner with you, I have already reached out to the NASP approved, the approved programs by the National Association of School Psychologists, who are virtual training programs. So one of the things that we could build into your proposal for the respecialization is that your candidates are taking a virtual online school psychology training program leading to certification. Here are some of the most essential things that you must have in your application. These are non-negotiables. I'm going to focus on the LEAs. relative to this presentation. Clearly, as I've already stated, you're going to have to demonstrate with data, with clear objective data, not one-year data, but longitudinal data, that you are a high needs district. For all of the applicants, you're also going to have to provide baseline data on the number of credentialed school psychologists that you have working in your district, the ratio of those school psychologists to the number of students in the district, and then start thinking about in the proposal how you're going to actually recruit, hire, maintain, and retain the school psychologists in the grant proposal during the grant years. One of the clear things that you're also going to have to show in your proposal is that you are going to be able to begin providing either prevention or intervention, tier 1, 2, and/or 3 services and supports to your students within 270 days of the beginning of the grant. So you're going to have to describe exactly what your work program is going to be so that you're able to accomplish this requirement. Some other requirements in the fine print of the current proposal. From a financial perspective, the U.S. Department of Education is going to limit what you are using in the grant, the funds that you're using for administrative, what are called indirect costs. Those are going to be limited to 5 or less % of the total grant funding that you are requesting. You are not going to be able to fund anything that relates to gender ideological promotion, political activism, racial stereotyping, or hostile environments, addressing hostile environments in your school or district. Some other must-dos in the fine print. As is typical of the U.S. Department of Education grant, you're going to have to use the funds only to supplement what you are currently funding across your district. That is, you are not allowed to use grant funds to supplant existing funds. You've got to make sure, as I've said before, that the school psychology folks that you are hiring, the school psychology folks that you are respecializing, will be credentialed. The students that receive the services from a mental health perspective, there is going to be a requirement that parents are contacted and they give consent for the services and supports that their children are receiving. And then, as usual, the grant is going to have to certify that it will stay in legal compliance of all the different federal laws that relate to education. So, building a winning application. Here are some strategic things to think about. There are going to be 3 primary areas that you need to ensure that your proposal addresses. A typical grant proposal from the U.S. Department of Education will give you the blueprint of what you need in your grant proposal. There may be, for example, 7 sections in the grant. Every section in the grant, when the proposal, the request for proposal comes out, will have a certain number of points affixed to it. Typically, a federal grant has a total of 100 points. And so what may happen is you have a section called the rationale for the proposed grant activities. And that is one section of the grant. And the RFP, the request for proposal, will say, all right, we are going to award up to 15 points in this section, and here are the criteria. So you will be given the blueprint and the scoring for the grant proposal, such that when the reviewers, the independent reviewers, and usually there are 3 of them, when they review your grant, what they are doing is they're going section by section in your grant, they're looking at the points, they're looking at the criteria, and they're giving you, for example, 14 out of 15 points in section 1. Now, this is all very clearly laid out, again, in the RFP. And so you're writing basically your grant to get points. You're not writing a novel. You're writing section by section, And it's all self-contained, because what the reviewers do not do is they don't take information in section 2, and if it's not in section 3, carry it into their evaluation of section 3. What has to be in section 3 from an evaluative perspective is what is written in section 3. And so breaking the grant down into at least component parts, you're going to have to be writing in your grant proposal sections that relate to and demonstrate a compelling need for the services, the supports, the funding that you're proposing in your grant. And so you're going to have a needs assessment completed with the data relative to staffing, relative to students, relative to community risk factors that you are now writing into your grant. There's going to have to be sections that relate to a clear implementation plan. How are you going to do the recruitment and retention? How are you going to do the service delivery of the social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health services? What are the partners you're going to engage in your grant activities, and do you have agreements with them? The agreements have to be in the grant. There are going to be sections in the grant on measurable outcomes. So you're going to have to identify SMART objectives, how you're going to collect the data, how you're going to evaluate the data, what the criteria of success are, and then how you're going to utilize the grant in terms of sustainable strategies. One of the things that the U.S. Department of Education is always concerned about is that the grant, a 5-year grant, for example, is not a one and done. In other words, you do 5 years of the grant, and then the next year, without the grant funding, everything goes away. So the Department of Ed, in your proposal, is going to need to see how are you building the sustainability over the 5 years of the grant so that the activities of the grant will live beyond the funding. From a budget perspective, the current proposal relative to the school-based mental health grant right now talks about allowable costs. So you will be able to write into the grant personnel salaries, benefits, training stipends. You'll be able to write in professional development and how your school psychology and the respecialization priority are going to be certified. You can write in equipment such as mental health assessment tools, but I will tell you right now, you're probably not going to be able to write in equipment from a hardware, for example, buying computers or whiteboard perspective. And then certainly travel is allowable in the grant as it's related to the grant goals and objectives in terms of recruitment, training, conferences. The federal government, when they review your grant, is going to be looking at the cost effectiveness of your strategies. Are you leveraging partnerships? Are you utilizing the existing infrastructure in a school, in the district, in the community? Are you integrating recruitment events? Are you sharing resources, if you're in a consortium, across school district lines? You're going to need, as I said earlier, to have in your grant proposal an evaluation and sustainability section. And so you're going to have to look at some of these key metrics and reflect these in the grant proposal. The staffing outcomes, to be sure, the number of school psychologists that you expect to hire and retain from a year-to-year perspective, the diversity of the workforce, the completion of the credentials in school psychology. You're going to have to show in your proposal and thereafter, every grant, once it's awarded, has to write an annual report. And so you're going to have to show on an annual basis the student outcomes, the students' utilization of mental health services, the academic and the behavioral improvements, the reduced numbers of disciplinary incidents. You're going to have to show in your grant another key metric, the sustainability planning, how your school psychologists that you're recruiting and retaining are going to stay in your district after the funding is gone, how you're going to integrate, for example, the school psychology salaries and benefits into the district budget. Sustainability planning. strategies that you may be using in terms of Medicaid billing to, again, support your school psychologists after the grant funding is over, and then community partnerships that may support all of these areas altogether. So the competitive edge, what's going to make your grant proposal stand out? Well, here are 4 critical areas, and I'm basing this on my experience of having done grant writing for almost 40 years. The first grant that I received was back in 1993, and I've received, again, not just $40 million in grant awards, but I've received over 15 different federal grants during my career. And so the competitive edge, you've got to show in your proposal a data-driven approach. You've got to have compelling data that demonstrate the need, the goals, the activities that are written into your proposal. You've got to show innovation, thinking beyond the traditional recruitment types of activities, for example. So one innovation may be the use of those NASP-approved virtual school psychology training programs. You're going to have to show the comprehensive planning, but embedded in the comprehensive planning are the people who you're going to be working with, the leaders who you're going to designate in your district. You're going to need a national thought director, a national thought leader. I have been the national thought leader on those school climate transformation grants that I talked to you about. I'm happy to be considered as your national thought leader for your grant proposal. You're going to have grant evaluators. I have 2 or 3 grant evaluators that I have used over the past 20 years who we will be able to write into your grant. And again, the 4th thing that is going to make your application stand out are those strategic partnerships. So I want you to think about the potential partners that you have in these relevant areas to the grant, school-based mental health partners that are in your community. Think about any local universities that hopefully have a school psychology training program that we might be able to partner with. These are the things that are going to make your proposal stand out. I need to tell you, as I said, typical U.S. Department of Ed grant proposals are based on 100 points. The school-based mental health grant program was actually paneled a year ago, and about 90 different school districts across the country received the grant funding. Now, those grants, those school-based mental health grants, have been taken back by the U.S. Department of Education so that they can fund this new initiative. But my point here is that the 90 school districts last year that received the grant, the lowest score that got funded was approximately 95 out of 100. So the competition for this grant is great. And so you need to consider the things on this slide that will help make your application not just stand out, but receive the maximum number of points. Some of the common pitfalls to avoid, things that we need to learn from other people's mistakes. Some of the application killers are vague or unrealistic goals, insufficient documentation and data, weak partnership commitments, and your partners are going to write a letter of support that will be included in your proposal. And then an application killer is a missing element. If it's not there, then it can't get the points and you're going to be marked down. Some of the implementation challenges that your reviewers are going to be looking for are your underestimates of recruitment time, inadequate supervision planning for your school psychology folks, poor community engagement, and weak evaluation design. When your grant proposal is paneled, at the end of the process, you will receive from the grant reviewers through the U.S. Department of Education, you will receive your scoring sheets. You will know exactly how many points in each section you got out of the maximum number of points in that section. And you will also receive the written notes that explicitly are written by the reviewers to explain why they gave you all of the points or why they gave you none of the points. And so relative to these implementation challenges, you will get direct feedback after the grant has been paneled specific to your grant proposal. Some success stories and best practices. Let's learn from the winners. Winning characteristics, strong district and university partnerships, comprehensive recruitment strategies, clear service delivery models, robust evaluation plans. And just so you know, I wrote 2 of these school-based mental health grants a year ago for 2 districts. Some of the innovations that you may be putting in from basically other winners: grow your own programs, telehealth service expansion, community mental health partnerships, and alternative certification paths. Some of the timelines right now that you need to be mindful of. This grant was announced on July 17th of 2025. Right now, as I am taping this presentation, we are in the midst of the comment period. Typical grants from the U.S. Department of Education, they are sent out in an announcement on the Federal Register, and then there's a 30-day comment period. The U.S. Department of Education then takes all of the comments, integrates them, and then makes a decision as to whether or not they're going to modify the proposal as it was published, in this case on July 17th. We expect that process to be done sometime in the early fall of 2025, and then we expect the formal RFP for the grant to come out in late 2025. Now, a critical point here, typically, once they announce the request for proposals, you typically have 30 days or less to get your proposal in to the U.S. Department of Education. And so there is a quick turnaround relative to writing this grant, which means that right now you need to be thinking about the different elements and component parts of your proposal. You need to think about the needs assessment and the planning that you've got to reflect in your proposal, the partnerships and the teams that you're going to write into the proposal. You need to develop an application strategy. Who is going to be on your writing team? Who is going to be available to do the sign-offs that you need to be able to submit the proposal? And the key sign-off is your superintendent. The proposal is submitted by your district, and your superintendent or your CEO, whoever that person is the official sign-off of the proposal. And so you need to be thinking right now that it may be that before December 31st of this year, you're going to have your proposal signed, sealed, delivered, and submitted. So why, on a functional level, is this grant proposal and this grant program important? Clearly, the school-based mental health services grant is not just about funding. It's about your children, your students, and the mental health services and supports that they need to be healthy, intact, and able to engage on an academic level. You need to think about how this grant has the potential to transform your district's approach to mental health services, not just for 5 years, but for perhaps 25 years or more. And this grant is going to be, again, essential in terms of ensuring that your district has a legacy of qualified mental health professionals in your schools with high levels of training to be able to address the needs of your students and potentially to prevent crises before they actually occur. So let's talk about partnerships. One of the things that I'm trying to reflect in this presentation without scaring anyone is that writing a federal grant is a complex endeavor. My kind of metaphor on this, when you're writing a grant, when I'm writing a grant, it's like peeling an onion. I will be spending many times 3 weeks straight going through different parts of the grant, different areas of the proposal, peeling things away to ensure that we have a winning proposal. I've already reflected that this is a highly competitive process. Even though there are likely to be 80 to 90 of these school-based mental health grants awarded, there may be up to 500 districts who are applying for those funds. Sometimes one of the challenges you have is you're in a small district or even a medium-sized district and you don't have somebody with the grant writing expertise. I've worked with large urban school districts that, again, they have grant writers, but the grant writers are not in this niche of school-based mental health services. And so you may have a grant writer, but they may not have the content expertise to really be able to write that winning grant that gets you the funds that you want. And then there are the time and the resource issues. If you've got 30 days to do a turnaround, you've got to decide, do we have the personnel to be able to pull all this off? And so a partnership is something I want you to seriously think about. You need to have on your team somebody who has proven expertise in writing these types of federal grants. You need to have somebody who understands school psychology and the training in school psychology. I was a trainer in school psychology for over 20 years. I was at either the State University of New York at Albany for 4 years or the University of South Florida for 18 years. I was the director of the USF program for 12 of those years. And so I know school psychology training and what needs to be available to people who are going through a credentialing program and process. You need somebody with a winning track record on your team and somebody who can give you the end-to-end support so that you can write that grant piece by piece by piece. Now, what I'm alluding to in all of this is that I am a grant writer and obviously an experienced grant writer. And one of the things that I'm gearing up to do is to partner with school districts across the country to write this grant. I've already begun to frame out part of my website that districts I work with will have access to that basically disaggregates the grant and the grant process and gives you the component parts, the things that you need to do step by step by step in order to write your proposal. In most cases, I will write 85% of your grant proposal, and you will write the filler in, the 15% of the local needs, the local data. One of the things that I've been doing for the past 8 months is I've been gearing up in terms of artificial intelligence. And so on the grant proposal website, I will have prompts that you can put into ChatGPT that will help you to look at your data in your district, in your community, synthesize that data in terms of being able to tell the local story that clearly identifies your need for the grant activities that you put in your proposal. And so that end-to-end support is not just somebody with the expertise in writing these grants, but somebody with the expertise in how to work with districts so that they can write the grant and build the process themselves. And so I would like to offer my expertise to partner with you in helping you to write this grant. I've got obviously a deep understanding of school psychology and school psychology workforce issues. I've got extensive grant writing expertise. I've got a proven track record. I'm going to bring you through this process from the initial planning process before the grant request for proposal is published through the actual submission of the grant proposal itself. I'm going to be able to customize strategies. I've worked in school districts, thousands of school districts over 40 years in every state in the country, from rural to suburban to urban. And I'll be able to customize to the needs of your district the goals and activities that will be in your grant proposal. And I will be there providing you the technical assistance throughout this grant writing period. And so the call to action. Are you ready to transform your district's, your educational settings, mental health service delivery system? Can you move your system from from excellence to the next level of excellence, or maybe we're just okay to a level that you're really providing the services and supports that your students need. I know that some of you are asking yourself, all right, so if we engage Howie in a grant writing partnership, what is it going to cost to us? As I said earlier, I wrote 2 of these grants last year, and I will just tell you, full transparency, I charged both of those districts $17,500. Well, right now, with the artificial intelligence, with the website, with my need and desire to try to get this grant into as many school districts' hands as possible, right now I'm offering my grant writing services for $8,999. Now, again, I can't promise that in another month, this price is not going to go up. But right now, you're listening to this webinar. I appreciate the fact that you are interested in this school-based mental health grant, and I want to provide value at a cost-effective level for your district. But one of the things we're going to have to think about is the importance of beginning your needs assessment now, developing the partnership strategy with my support, and creating the infrastructure so that you can write that winning application. So I appreciate your time in listening to this presentation. I can tell you, given 40 years of experience, given my work as an evidence-based program since 2000, 5 different school climate transformation grants over the past decade, 40 to 45 days a year, working in districts as a full partner, that together we can transform mental health services and bring your district and schools up to the next level of excellence. Your students clearly deserve the best mental health support system that we can provide, but here we have an opportunity for federal funding to make that happen, perhaps in a far quicker and more comprehensive way than you've ever imagined. Let's think about this partnership, because partnerships ensure your success. This is not just about money. This is about transforming students' lives, one student at a time. As you think about some of the questions that are specific to your district, your school, your educational setting, I want you to know that I am absolutely available and willing to answer any of your questions. And in fact, what I will do is I will offer you a free 1-hour Zoom consult with your team, absolutely free, for no charge. If you are serious about writing for this grant, I will spend an hour, 90 minutes with you to answer all the questions that you have about the grant, about my partnership, and about what we need to do together to write a winning proposal. Here's my contact information. You've got my email, you've got my phone. Absolutely feel free to go on my website, www.projectachieve.info. I do a bi-monthly blog that many of you may be reading. Whatever I can do to help you in your deliberations relative to potentially writing a proposal for this grant, I am there for you. And again, I appreciate your time, and I look forward, hopefully, to talking with you soon.